Hey guys, even here with the Old School Labs, and I am going to try and answer the question, the $1,000,000 question: who was better, Kevin Levrone or Flex Wheeler? Now, you can also name this video who is the best uncrowned Mr. Olympia of all time, because these two guys would definitely be my top choice. Would they be top 2? I'm not sure. There are also some other really good bodybuilders like Kai Green, who was probably leaner and bigger and would fit more into current modern bodybuilding standards and would probably beat both of these guys, but that's very arguable. Some people will disagree with that. He had a bubble gut, he didn't have traps and forearms and so on, so let's not even get into that kind of stuff. Let's not talk about are these two guys the best uncrowned Mr. Olympias of all time, but let's just compare them because they are the most dominant bodybuilders from the 90s, probably the most genetically gifted ones. That's for sure. I mean, nobody can argue with that. And also probably the ones who didn't really fulfill their maximum potential. I mean, Flex Wheeler was in it, definitely, very, very, very much. But what was lacking was, I guess you can say, training, really. And was he really living the lifestyle? Well, I don't think he lived the lifestyle like Dorian Yates, for example. So if he really pushed it hard, like Dorian, if he had Dorian's mindset, he would be the Mr. Olympia. Dorian admitted that, and same thing with Kevin Levrone, really. I mean, he pushed the envelope until 1992, and a couple of weeks prior to 1993 Mr. Olympia, he tore his pec. After that, it was never the same. He was only prepping for months before the contest, before the Mr. Olympia or Arnold Classic. But, I mean, guys, he competed regularly. He competed every single year, pretty much. I think he was more consistent than Flex. And now, in this video, the question is really, who would win the show if both of them were at their best? That's the question. That's what everybody is thinking. It's not about who has more wins, who had better performance in which year, but before we answer the question who would be better if these guys were both at their best, we're gonna check the previous performance. I mean, we're gonna check the track record. We're gonna see who placed where, at which Mr. Olympia, at which Arnold Classic, British Grand Prix, and other shows that I can find that I know about. So let's go. Let's start with 1992, which was first Mr. Olympia that Kevin Levrone ever did. That was actually the year where he turned pro, where he won a pro show and went to the Mr. Olympia and placed second after Dorian Yates. And in my opinion, that's his best shape of all time. Kevin was the first to compete at the Mr. Olympia. Flex came next year, in 1993. Now, Kevin was second at the Mr. Olympia 1992, but the next year he wasn't in that top 2 mix. Who took second place? Yeah, it was Flex. So the reason for that is probably the fact that Kevin tore his pec weeks before that show. If Kevin came in the way he was in 1992, or even a bit bigger because he gained some muscle in that year, but he didn't come conditioned because of the injury, and yeah, his pec was asymmetrical. If Kevin came at his 100%, who would be victorious? Well, that's the question we're gonna try to answer in this video, but before we get to that question, let's go with the next year, 1994. And yeah, we're looking only at Mr. Olympia right now. Later we're gonna check the Arnold Classic, but 1994 Mr. Olympia, second place was Sean Ray. We don't need to talk about who was first place. We all know it was Dorian Yates through the majority of the 90s, and then Ronnie Coleman at the end. But as far as the second place, yeah, it was Sean Ray this year, and Flex did not compete this year because he had a car accident. Kevin was third, Flex didn't compete. As far as 1995, Kevin was second again, but Flex was 8th place. And this was only the year after he had that car accident, although Kevin also had his second year of that pec tear. Let's go now to 1996, and this year we had Kevin Levrone at the 3rd place, Sean Ray again was 2nd, and Flex Wheeler was 4th. So again, Kevin Levrone beats Flex Wheeler. 1997, of course, you all know Nasser Al-Sambari was supposed to win that year, and he was robbed, quote unquote. I personally disagree with that, but it is what it is. Kevin Levrone was 4th this year, Sean was 3rd. Flex again didn't compete. Why did he didn't compete in 97? It could have been the year where he was attacked by those ninjas, if you know about that incident, although he didn't compete. Next year he came, and next year he came strong. Now this time around he could have won the show, at least he was thinking that he was going to do it, if Ronnie Coleman didn't happen, but Ronnie Coleman happened. It happened big time. We had the creation of the ultimate bodybuilder of all time, the best of all time, Ronnie Coleman. So Flex was really probably at his best, considering everything. Maybe people would prefer his 1993 version because he was more streamlined. It was super crazy and static. But in 1998, he was also big. He was very big and full. Although second place, Kevin was fourth, but 1998 was far from Kevin's best. 1999, we also had another runner-up position of Flex Wheeler. He was second, of course, and Kevin was fourth again. And now we're coming to 2000, year 2000. And this year, Kevin was second, so he beat Flex Wheeler, who was third. At this point, Flex's physique started to fade, and Kevin was second, but that was, in my opinion, one of the weakest second places of all time. I don't think it was even close to Ronnie Coleman. So that was 2000. 2001, Kevin was still competing, but at that point, Flex has retired. So Kevin was third, Jay Cutler came up. That was the year where Jay Cutler became the runner-up, and he was a runner-up for a while after that. So that's as far as the Mr. Olympia goes. Now let's check the Arnold Classic. So I'm sure you guys know that Flex used to hold the record for the most Arnold Classic wins before he was beaten by Dexter Jackson. So he started his reign in 1993, the year where he actually placed second at the Mr. Olympia. He also won the Arnold Classic. Second place was Lila Prada, and then we also had Vince Taylor, Paul Dillard, but no Kevin Levrone. In 1994, we did not have Flex Wheeler, but we had Kevin Levrone, who won that year's Arnold Classic. So it kind of seems like these guys talked about who's gonna do which show, and they didn't want to collide because they would definitely risk a lot because they were so close. But in 1995, neither one of them won. Flex competed and he was second. Mike Francois was first place, and this guy had an accident. I'm not really sure what kind of accident it was later, but he had a potential to be one of the top guys. Unfortunately, that accident stopped him from doing that. Anyways, in 1996 at the Arnold Classic, we had something interesting. We had a collision of these two top guys, Flex Wheeler versus Kevin Levrone, and they were both, well, I don't want to say at their best because that would make a definite conclusion because one guy won, but I would say that they were both very much on. They were both on. One probably more than the other because Kevin Levrone won, and he had the torn pec. His pecs weren't perfectly symmetrical, although he had better fullness and better conditioning and everything else, so he deserved that victory, although it was very, very close. Very, very close. And both of these guys had a lot of fans, so the fans probably didn't know how to react, what to expect. It could have went either way. They were both very much on, but Kevin beat Flex. And this kind of sends a strong message. So next year was 1997, where Kevin was 8th place. Why was that? Beats me. I don't know. Flex won, so he destroyed Kevin this year. And apparently, Kevin wasn't on since he was 8th place. So I think that 1996 Arnold Classic sends the message better than this one. 1998 was yet another victory for Flex, and Kevin didn't compete at all. Next year, Arnold Classic was Kevin's 2nd place, and Flex didn't compete. He skipped this year because he was probably focusing on the Mr. Olympia. He probably wanted to win the Mr. Olympia because he was so close. He was 2nd place the year before. Next year, we have another victory of Flex Wheeler, and Kevin Levrone taking the 3rd spot. So again, it was pretty close. Chris Cormier, of course, took that 2nd spot. 2001, Flex didn't compete. Did Kevin compete later in 2002? Yeah, and he took 5th spot, but Flex didn't compete anymore. So that's the end as far as the Arnold Classic. What about the other shows, you're wondering? Well, considering that I was born in 1995, I didn't really follow all of them, but I know for some of them, and I know about the 1999 British Grand Prix, which was a hell of a show. Kevin Levrone was 3rd, while Flex Wheeler was 2nd, so another victory for Flex. By the way, 4th place was Milos Charcher, very strong 4th place. He also had Nasser Asabari in that 5th spot mix, and the winner, of course, was Ronnie Coleman. So the show was stacked, and these guys were spot on. It was a really, really good show, considering that it wasn't a Mr. Olympia or Arnold Classic. It was really good. There were other shows like Night of Champions and so on, but let's not take a look at all of them. It won't really explain anything. I mean, let's just try to compare these two guys, their physiques. So let's just go into the pose-by-pose comparison. But guys, please, don't get too hung up on the details. Of course, this is not a real comparison. It didn't happen, so the ratio is probably not gonna be ideal. All the photos aren't gonna be from the same year because you cannot find them on Google. What I found, and I think this is the best way to approach this. And guys, let's not focus on conditioning, because these guys were differently conditioned every single year. Let's focus on the shape of the muscle. We're also gonna ignore the fullness or the size, to an extent, you'll see what I'm talking about, but basically what we're focusing mainly on is their shape, their completeness of the physique, the muscular development. And that's how we're gonna determine who was a better bodybuilder as much as we can. So let's go with the first pose, and that's gonna be front double bicep. This is Flex's version of 1993 Mr. Olympia, where he placed second. And as far as Kevin, this could be 1992 Mr. Olympia, but it could be something else, maybe a little bit later, maybe 94, 95. I'm not sure, honestly, but yeah, they were young here and not as big as they got later in their careers. So let's focus on what we can control, what was the same throughout the years, and that's the shape of the muscle, the symmetry, the proportions, the completeness, the development, and yeah, let's go with the arms first, the biceps, and this is the front double bicep pose. Flex has a little bit nicer shape, I mean, he has peakier biceps. Kevin has full muscle bellies, long biceps, long triceps, but not as peaky. So I guess it could be a personal preference, which kind of muscle you prefer, but you cannot ignore that Flex was the sultan of symmetry. He's more symmetrical, and his arms are as well. So there's that, and the fact that he has peakier biceps. So me personally, I would go with Flex when it comes to arms, although Kevin's arms are probably one of the best arms in the history of bodybuilding when they are hanging down the sides. When he lifts them up in the front double bicep, it's not as good as they are when he does the most muscular, for example. Based on Kevin's chest, you can determine if this is post or after 1992 Mr. Olympia, since he tore his right pec before the 1993 Mr. Olympia, and right here, I cannot clearly see that there is a pec there. Maybe it does look a little bit asymmetrical, but his whole other side does. And I think that's because of the lighting. So I'm pretty sure this is 1992. And right there, I mean, you cannot really see much of a chest in the front double bicep. You can see the thickness, and it's pretty much the same. Now we come to the V-taper. And I would say that Kevin had thicker lats, but Flex genetically had smaller waist. I believe his waist was 28 inches while being 220 pounds or something like that. And that's insanely impressive. So he was genetically smaller in the waist, and that kind of makes his V-taper even better, but Kevin does have thicker lats, and you can notice that. Now when it comes to quads, early in his career, Kevin had decent quads, really, he had this fullness, but he never really had the shape or the details, like Flex did. Now Flex had somehow weird knees, right, and the elbows. They were popping too much, and there wasn't a lot of muscle in that area, so he had kind of high insertions on quads. And that's what I didn't really like that too much about his physique, about the shape of his quads. I would prefer Kevin's quads because of that. They seemed fuller, rounder, meatier, but Flex had better detail. So you can go either way, whatever you prefer, but I would go with Flex still. I don't think that neither of these guys has amazing quads. I think Flex could have had a little bit fuller and rounder quads, and Kevin should have had a little bit bigger and more separated quads, but I can and will say that Flex was better in this region. So as far as the front double bicep, I would go with Flex. Let's go with the next pose. Finding a good photo of Flex Wheeler hitting front lat spread wasn't easy, but I found what I found, and this is a bit older version of Flex. He was bigger, but he didn't have the aesthetics as much as he had when he was younger, and this is a younger version of Kevin. And these are the best photos that I could find on internet, so it is what it is. Now let's analyze it. Arms, I would go with Kevin here, because Flex seems like he injected them with a lot of oil, and they lost the shape, the natural shape, the symmetry. And when I say symmetry, I don't necessarily mean two opposite sides looking the same, which is a definition of symmetry, but there is also another definition of symmetry, and it is, as you can see, correct or pleasing proportion of the parts of a thing. I didn't know that by now. I wasn't sure why bodybuilding people were saying symmetry when they were referring to proportions, but apparently that's what this word means, and you learn new things every day, and English is my second language. So Flex did kind of hurt his proportions or symmetry by stuffing his arms with oil, and he hurt the proportions of shoulder to arm ratio, and then also chest to arm and to shoulder ratio. So it didn't look very aesthetic, it didn't look natural. Kevin never did that kind of stuff, and he always got bigger in arms and shoulders and everything. Later he was much bigger than this, but this is the best quality footage you can find, and Kevin was very efficient in doing this pose. He not only had big forearms and arms and wide shoulders, wide clavicles, but he also had pretty big lats. Now, they weren't as thick as, for example, Dorian's, but they looked good, and it was a good pose for Kevin. As far as flex, what I would give to him in this pose is what we talked about before: quads, better details of the quads, and smaller waist. But still, I would give this pose to Kevin overall. Oops, how did this get here? I don't know. And this is just a reminder to those people who do not think that Ronnie Coleman is the best bodybuilder of all time. There are that kind of people. There are. Some of them think it's Flex or somebody else. No, not even close. Just look at his madness. This was insane. And also for the people who think Brandon Curry wouldn't place in a top 10 during the 90s, also very laughable statement at least. And I think I'm kind of shifting towards the idea that he would maybe even be the Mr. Olympia during the 90s, but that's a strong thought, and it's far from the point of this video. So guys, if I make a special video about this, you can comment about it. Right now, let's go with the next pose, back double bicep. Now, this is what makes you or breaks you, especially in this case, because these guys are very close, and I think it's back what's going to determine who was a better bodybuilder. So, Kevin Levrone, he had pretty thick back, he had pretty low lats, but his back sort of lacked shape. Maybe the lats were too low inserted, the waist wasn't as small as Flex's, and I believe it was about 1994 or 1995 when Dorian Yates explained to Kevin how to properly train back. He introduced Kevin to bent over barbell reverse grip rows, and the very next year after one off season, Dorian says that Kevin came in with much better back development, and it was the case. And this photo that you're watching right here is later in his career, so it's not 1992 or 1993. I believe this is like 1995 at least. So his back came up big time. It was much thicker, and this guy had just the best genetics, one of the best genetics of all time in the history of bodybuilding. So if he knew how to train something, it would grow. And it grew. And it came up big time, but he didn't have the small waist like Flex, and he didn't have the shape like Flex, and he wasn't symmetrical. When I say symmetrical, I'm thinking of proportions as well. So basically, if you go for thickness, you could go with Kevin because this guy was thick for days, but then you need to consider the shape, the details, the symmetry and everything else, and also the leg development. The biggest criticism that I would have for Kevin is his leg development. Early in his career, it was symmetrical, it was proportionate, for sure. Later on, it seems like he got lazy. And also, legs are known to be that kind of body part that you need to train frequently and consistently. He was known that later in his career, he did not train year-round. He would just take a break from bodybuilding, and 4 months before the show, he would get back into it, he would regain the size, and sometimes, very often, came a bit fuller than the last time, but he didn't take the off-season for improvements. And when it comes to legs, not only that Kevin's legs needed to be improved and bigger, but he needed to train them frequently if he wanted to keep them full and big. He didn't do that, so in comparison to some other guys, they seemed a little bit smaller than his upper body. Now, I'm not saying that his legs are small, but me personally, when I talk about aesthetics, I want to see dominant legs, the legs that are dominating over the upper body. Kevin didn't have that. Flex did. And for that reason, I will give this pose to Flex. He was more symmetrical, he had better detail, he had smaller waist. From the back, I think he's better than Kevin, even though Kevin is a bit thicker, depending on the year, of course. But we're talking about the shape right now, not about the conditioning or anything like that, not the fullness. We're talking only about the shape. So if you talk about the shape, if these guys both brought their best fullness and conditioning, I think that Flex would take the win. So now we come to the back lat spread, and guys, I could not find a better photo of Flex in this pose. I don't know why, and that could be a part of a reason why we don't have this pose in classic physique, because these classic guys like him didn't really do it very often. At least I couldn't find it in better resolution than this, or just decent resolution. So I don't think it would be fair to compare it in some other resolution that's not as good as this. So I took these two photos of these two guys, and this is what you get. So basically, if you take a look at Kevin right here, you will see that he has very low inserted lats, and that he has a thick back. Now this is a thick back, but it lacks in shape. The lats are too low inserted, so It's a very, very thick, it's very, very strong bag, but it doesn't have that nice flowing V-taper like flex does. But I'm not saying that flex is better because of that. You could go either way. It really depends on what you prefer, what the judges prefer. It could go either way. If you prefer nice lines, a nice looking V-taper, quality details, then you would go with flex. But if you prefer freakiness and mass, and that freak factor that Kevin had, you would go with Kevin. Me personally, in this pose, I will go with Kevin. Alright, so now we have two side poses, side chest and side tricep. We're starting off with side chest. Now I found this 1993 version of flex, and it looks just magnificent. Also, we have a 1992 version of Kevin Levrone, but what I'm thinking is, later in their careers, things kind of switched. Right here, flex looks better in the side chest. Yeah, he does. He has everything. He has absolutely everything. The arms are on point, shoulders are just right there. How they should look, I mean, they're detailed and big, and chest also. The glutes are showing the separation. The quad sweep, the hamstring also is looking awesome. Everything is just on point. Kevin, though, his hamstrings aren't popping as much as flexes. He isn't really showing his other leg, maybe just the lighting. Anyways, it's not the highest quality photo, but what I'm saying is later on in their careers, they both grew, they both gained a lot of size. They had to because of the competition. The other guys were just bigger, so they had to get bigger as well. And when that happened, the tables turned. Kevin looked better in the side chest. I may even make a video about the guys who gained size and they shouldn't have done it, like Flex. He had to do it. I mean, that was the show. That was what the judges were asking for. If you wanted to win the show, you need to be as big as Ronnie Coleman. So Flex tried to emulate that, and he did it to a certain extent, but it didn't look that well on his physique. Here you can see that he probably stuffed his shoulders, his rear delts, particularly with some kind of oil, arms as well, and everything else just didn't flow as well as it used to when he was smaller. But Kevin didn't do anything with the oil. It's obvious. He just grew. He just got fuller, and with his long muscle bellies, it just looked freaking impressive. And this is one of the best side chest poses of all time, if you ask me. He was this conditioned later on, though, as he was when he was younger, but this fullness, this shape cannot be ignored. So, younger Flex beats young Kevin, older Kevin beats young Flex. Does older Kevin beat young Flex? I think so. So this one could be a tie, but I will give it to Kevin. I think Kevin's side chest, when he grew, is one of the best side chest poses of all time. So let's give this one to Kevin. Let's go with the next pose, side tricep. So not much of a side tricep, it's more of a front tricep pose right here. But it's not all about doing the pose properly, it's more about presenting your physique in the best way possible. Obviously right here you have 1993 version of Flex, and this is a little bit older version of Kevin. Now Kevin grew, of course, later, but mainly with his upper body. His lower body stayed the same, I would say. So upper body, I would give to Kevin because of his arms. His triceps were just so full. They were attached so low. His biceps, the same thing. And when he would put them on the sides of his body, not so much in the double bicep pose, but on the sides of his body, those arms looked freaking insane. His chest was also very full. So upper body, you can give it to Kevin, but because of the legs, because of the overall flow of the physique, the waist as well, it just looks better on Flex. It does. I mean, we're not talking about the conditioning, the detail, or the fullness. We're talking about the shape, or the proportions, however you want to call it. But Kevin was known for not having super balanced legs, and not having insanely small waist, like Flex. I mean, his waist is small, don't get me wrong, but Flex was a special story. So I give this pose to Flex. I mean, just look at this. Look at his side tricep on Flex. Very, very complete, very dominant, hard to beat, and I would have to say quite aesthetic, quite classic. I give him this pose, yeah, no doubt. And now we have two more front poses left, abs and thighs and most muscular. So it depends on the era really and what the judges were looking for. If they were looking for aesthetics, they would definitely take a look more at the abs and thighs like they kind of did in 2018 when they wanted to put the aesthetics back into place. But back in the 90s, being a monster was something that became very trendy, so at that point in time for bodybuilding, most muscular was probably more appreciated pose. Now we're looking at their abs and thighs poses, and I mean, this is another older version of Flex. He was a little bit older here, so he was way more aesthetic when he was younger. This could be like the year 1999 or 2000 even. I'm not sure, but he was older. You can see it on his face also. He had a mustache. He didn't have that when he was younger. And his physique wasn't at his best. And also with Kevin. Kevin's abs and thighs also looked better when he was younger, when he was 1992, for example. But this is the best quality photos that I could find. So I wanted to compare them here. And I would either way come with the same conclusion. So it's abs and thighs. Kevin wasn't known for having the best thighs. Flex's waist was smaller, way smaller, and he had better abs, better developed abs, genetically more pleasing to the eye, more symmetrical, and just overall more dominant abs and thighs pose. Flex was the representation of classic, of aesthetics. Kevin though was something different. He was a mix, he was a hybrid of being a freak while being aesthetic. So he's probably one who did it the best. He was a freak, don't get me wrong, he was a huge guy. He had insanely large muscle everywhere, but he was still pretty aesthetic. So he was a mix, he was a hybrid of those two things. In some poses it looked really good, but in some poses the guys who represented simply the classic, like Flex, would win. So this pose won by Flex. Let's go with the last pose, the most muscular pose. Even though Flex looks better probably here, I will give this pose to Kevin, because Kevin is kind of a king of this pose. He did this probably the best. He had very dominant arms, and especially, as I said already, when he would put them down the side. Flex, yeah, he looks amazing right here. He probably looks better, but this is not exactly the common side that you would see there in the 90s. Flex wasn't really known for being the most muscular guy. In this photo right here, he looks probably more dominant, but Kevin is known for this pose, for sure. What Flex was known for was that V-taper, the small waist, the aesthetics, but what Kevin was known for was those cannonball delts, insanely large arms, forearms as well, the overall fullness, the roundness of the physique. So in this pose, Kevin used to dominate everyone, basically. I mean, Ronnie Coleman was way more complete and he was a better bodybuilder, but when it came to this pose, it was always kind of close. So this pose won by Kevin. Alright, so let's summarize all the poses. Front double bicep won by Flex. Front lat spread won by Kevin. Back double bicep won by Flex. Back lat spread won by Kevin. That's a tie. Side chest won by Kevin. Side tricep won by Flex. Abs and thighs won by Flex. And most muscular won by Kevin. It's a tie. It's a tie, guys. 28 minutes into the video, and if you guys are still with me, I'm sure you were at least hoping that you would at least learn who was a better bodybuilder of these two guys, but we have a tie in the end. So let's not focus on the poses, pose by pose comparisons, because it really would depend on who came sharper, who came in better fullness, who would peak more on that day, and that guy would win. Taking a look at their track record, you will notice that Kevin won the Arnold Classic 2 times, while Flex won it 4 times. When it came to Mr. Olympia, Flex was a runner-up 3 times, although Kevin was a runner-up 4 times. So you cannot really make a definite statement. It could have went either way, depend on who would come better peaked, but that 1996 Arnold Classic is kind of making me lean towards Kevin, because they were both on, these two guys, and Kevin had a torn pec, and he won. So, me personally, if you ask me which physique do I prefer, if Kevin is spot on full and conditioned, when his legs are full, and with his pec torn or not, that doesn't really matter that much, I find Kevin's physique more impressive than Flex's. Me personally, I'm a bigger fan of Kevin's physique. I'm not saying that Kevin is a better bodybuilder, that's just my personal preference. I like his aesthetics more, I like the shape of his muscle more. But when it comes to official judging, I think Flex is a more complete bodybuilder. Kevin has a freak factor, and that freak factor can help him win majority of the poses, really, and that's how he can win if he's spot on. But if you talk about the judging criteria, Flex has more complete physique. He doesn't lack pretty much on anything. So again, guys, we cannot make a definite conclusion. I'm sorry, I cannot say who is better. These guys are too close. But me personally, I like Kevin's physique a little bit more, but I am aware that when it comes to judging criteria, flex is probably more complete, therefore a little bit better. Whatever you guys think, please let me know down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed this lengthy video, and if you like this kind of long videos, tell me about it down below in the comment section again. Like the video once again, and please subscribe for more bodybuilding videos like this. All the best, guys, and keep it old school.